You are now listening to Clay Mohr, the American storyteller.
I recently had a chance to visit one of my nephews that I hadn't seen for a while. Anymore, it seems like time flies. We have all the latest technology and things seem to be moving faster than ever. All this progress was supposedly designed to make our lives better and easier. But most of the time, I find myself scratching my head in disbelief, along with a little bit of skepticism. I always embrace the old adage, if it seems too good to be true, it usually is. My grandfather, bless his soul, used to remark about that all the time. The young man that does all my tech work, very, very talented, whom, by the way, I have the highest regard for, constantly reminds me, Clay, if it wasn't for all the technology, we wouldn't have this platform. Okay, I get it. I try to stay in touch with family and friends as much as possible. Don't get me wrong, things like FaceTime and Snapchat, to name a few, have been a great help. But sometimes you just need to have an old fashioned sit down, as they used to call it. So, all that being said, I decided to make a trip to Chicago to visit my nephew Mikey. I call him Mikey when he was a little guy. I guess it kind of stuck. Mikey's just a great kid. He married his childhood sweetheart, Karen. She's a super lady and it takes real good care of my nephew. But you know, the great thing is, she believes in him. When you truly believe in someone, the love, the respect, and all the rest of those things just come naturally. At one time during our visit, I found the three of us sitting down at their big dining room table one evening and having a nice glass of wine. Kind of a nice change of pace for me as I mostly see my friends in these shot in the beer joints. Don't get me wrong, I've been known to mix it up with these high society types. Well, turns out Kira is a real wine connoisseur. Oh, I forgot to mention, that was after she made us her homemade lasagna. She proudly informed me that it was her grandmother's recipe from Salerno, Italy. I told my nephew Mikey, in no short order, if I ever hear of any problems here, I'm going to come back over here and smack you right in the head. Well, Karen kind of smiled and blushed a little bit, but I meant every word of it. And my nephew knew it. And hopefully, Karen would never have to see that side of me. People show their affections in many different ways. Sometimes I find myself coming across a little rough at times, but all those that know me know I don't sugarcoat anything. Never saw the point in it. I found myself really enjoying our conversation that evening, and the two of them seemed like they were really opening up to me. I don't know if they felt they could confide in me, or it was just a wine as we were on the second bottle already. I've always tried to be a mentor to young people. The way I look at it, if others can benefit from some of my mistakes, which most have been pretty costly, then so be it. I've had a lot of people help me over the years. And it seems like once I had the opportunity to use some of their advice, most have passed on. This is kind of a way of paying them back. Kind of like keeping a promise, if you will. Well, turns out my nephew and his bride were doing quite well. But as we spoke, I could tell they were getting just a little burnout. I call it the big city blues. At one point, I stopped the two of them and told them, don't get so busy making a living that you forget to make a life. I thought to myself, well, being busy it's not the end of the world, but they should probably slow it down for a minute. Conversely, I talked to another young couple recently who, unlike my nephew and his wife, they're getting behind a little. They didn't seem to be too concerned about it, as the wife made a comment, it's okay, we love each other. I really had to bite my tongue on that one. I want to say, well, honey, that's great, but eventually you're going to be in love in the dark when the electric company shuts off your service. Well, Mikey said, I know we need a break. That's why we've been looking into these Airbnbs. I said, yeah, I heard of them. But that's like leaving Chicago and going to Chicago. In fact, the name or concept was put together by two guys from San Francisco. Figures. I went on to let them know that what they needed was small town USA. Karen said, well, what do you mean by that, Uncle Clay? I'd like that. It seems like I must be making a pretty good impression if she's calling me uncle. I said, well, Karen, it's kind of like the same concept, only they call it bed and breakfast. I went on to tell her that in most cases, it could actually be the people's home, that you're staying at, and perhaps if it's large enough, they may have multiple guests during your stay. It's usually a very down-home atmosphere. Sometimes they serve drinks or wine in the evening, and then a home-cooked breakfast in the morning. In some cases, you could stay 2 nights, if you wanted, which is kind of what I would recommend. Perhaps you could bring a couple of bottles of wine from your cellar to share. I'm sure you'd be a big hit. Well, Karen really warmed up to my idea. I try not to give advice, but when I do, I like to word it so it sounds like it was the other person's idea. Well, that sounds great, Uncle Clay. She told Mikey they could look together on the internet and find something. Nah, I said, no need for that. I already know of a place you can call. It's in a little town just southeast of Indianapolis. It's only about 3 hours away. In fact, if you stay the extra day, there's a lot of things to see. A good friend of mine has a small cafe in town with really great food. The name of the place is called the Family Cafe. The guy that owns it, Bob, is a good friend of mine. He's a retired truck driver that him and his wife always wanted to open up a small restaurant or diner. What I didn't tell him was we called him Big Mouth Bob. People thought he named it the Family Cafe because it was a family-orientated place, when really it was because he talked his whole family into working there. This guy was a real piece of work. I told Mikey, when you get there, just tell him you're my nephew, and he'll take real good care of you. I thought to myself, these kids are in for a real education. The last thing you want to do is call this guy and give him any advance notice. That would be brutal. Karen really liked the idea, and we ended the evening with the two of them making plans for the trip. I called it an early night and thanked both of them for a really great couple of days. Karen said, Uncle Clay, you have to come back real soon. Yeah, I will. And I asked Mikey to call me when they got back, from their trip, and let me know how it turned out. I told him I would be up early, as I wanted to get a head start back, and not to bother getting up or anything. We said our farewells, and I hit the hay. I got up early and threw my stuff together. As I walked through the kitchen and on my way out, Karen had left me a note on the table with a bottle of wine on top of it. It turns out the wine was for me, and along with a container of her homemade lasagna in the refrigerator for me to take home. The whole ride home, I was thinking about our visit, and you know how kind they were to me. Well, I started to get a little bit of a guilty conscience. I thought to myself, maybe I should call Big Mouth after all and let him know they were coming. That way, I could have him promise me he would tone it down a notch. Nonetheless, these two were in for an experience of a lifetime. I couldn't wait to hear how it turned out. But that's another story for another time. Bringing the past to the present. I am Clay Mohr.